Well, hello everyone. Thank you for your time and attention joining us for this webinar. This is Octopus 101. This is an introductory course for you to learn all you need to know about Octopus. If this is your first time seeing Octopus, this is a great session for you to be at. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Bristowe. I'd like to welcome you to this event, and this is a live event. We will be answering your questions here, so feel free to take advantage of the Q&A pane available to you through this, and we will endeavor to get your questions answered. Let us know in the comments where you're joining us from. We'd love to know where you're joining us from today. I am joining you from Australia, so it is a little bit early for me, but that's okay. We endeavor to let you know about Octopus any time of day. So feel free to send us a comment. Let us know where you're joining us from. That'd be great to know. And as always, everything that you'll be seeing here will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. So let me go ahead and get started. And I'll go ahead by sharing my screen here. One second. All right, let me switch over. So this is our website, octopus.com. If this is the first time you're seeing it, great, you're in the right place. Octopus.com includes all the information you need to know about everything related to Octopus Deploy. Octopus Deploy is a solution that allows you to do deployments of your software in a repeatable and reliable manner. We support a wide variety of targets as part of our solution. And if you need to know anything about the product, you can go to this website and we try our best to answer them here. We put a lot of effort into our website and you'll see a lot of information there. So, if there's a question I can't answer in today's webinar, we'll endeavor to put it here. So I can see folks are joining us from the States, from Spain, from Canada. Hello, Canada. I'm Canadian, although I live in Australia, so it's nice to see you. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to submit them into the Q&A pane. So what I'd like to do is just kind of give you a sense of what Octopus is all about, and I'll just do so by running through a few slides. So if you need to reach me, this is my email alias. Feel free to send me a note. I'd love to chat with you. Otherwise, you can reach out to our support alias. It's support@octopus.com. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to be doing in this webinar. So what I think I'd like to do is not only tell you the how, but also the why. Anytime you look at a technology, it's easy to understand like how things work or maybe what they do, the software, but understanding the why is probably the most important aspect of a technology. The reason why for that is because it helps you understand how you may apply it in your organization. So we're going to take a look at not only how Octopus works, but the why. The why should you use? And that's the first question we'll answer. We'll also talk about a bunch of things that may be new to you, but that's okay. We'll describe them in detail. These are the fundamentals that Octopus knows about. These are the taxonomy associated with Octopus things. So projects, deployment processes, releases, these and other types of terms you're going to hear throughout this webinar. And don't worry, we'll explain each one in detail, but these are the things that you need to understand when applying Octopus to your deployment processes. We'll then go into a demo showing how to create a deployment process from scratch, and then we'll show you how you can actually trigger those deployment processes through a CI process, a CI or continuous integration process or server. There are many out there. One example might be GitHub Actions, for example. There are many others, Azure Pipelines, TeamCity. These and other types of technologies or products are available for you to kickstart your pipelines. And so we'll show you how to do that as part of this webinar. So this is going to explain the why around Octopus Deploy. So way back when, in a time long ago in a galaxy far, far away, this is the state of the world for most app developers. So on the left, you have your app. On the right, you have your customers. And somewhere in between involves you and your team, your app, and getting it to your customers' hands. So in this scenario, where you have a basic deployment, this is a nice, easy, and simple scenario to understand. App updates get propagated through deployment scripts, which you maintain. Those get pushed into production, possibly other environments as well, and those go into the hands of your customers. But as we all know, software is not this easy. As things get a little bit more complicated, as requirements expand, this situation can change. So not only do we have different types of customers, but we have different types of environments that we want to target. We have different targets that we want to push to, different versions of these environments need to go to different customers, for example. So V1 of customer A may go to V1, customer A example, may not be the same as V2, which is to customer B. These and other sorts of scenarios can make deployments tricky, especially if these deployments are complicated. And as you can tell by the face of the DevOps engineer, she's not looking too happy right now. So complex deployments can be hard. And it gets even worse. As they get harder, the more you scale and grow, because you're having to maintain this sort of DIY scenario of maintaining your deployment scripts where you have different versions targeting different environments, targeting different customers. This is where it can get things can get really complicated. And now you're spending all your time managing deployment scripts and environments, and you're spending less time on innovation, which is really a sad story. So what we try to do with Octopus is we try to make this a better story for you. So Octopus Deploy, we talk about how we try to make complex deployments easy. So deployment is now managed by Octopus, and basically it's a single automation deployment platform, and it is considered, I guess, the source of truth for your deployments. So all your enterprise deployment processes are now executed with consistency and, more importantly, with compliance. And that is the goal of Octopus Deploy, is to make this not only easy, but also, in compliance. So we consider Octopus Deploy part of a best-of-breed pipeline. There are many solutions in the ecosystem out there. There are many products that are available in the marketplace, and we think that CI, or continuous integration, is a problem that's mostly solved. So, if you're talking about GitHub or Azure DevOps or TeamCity, or take your build or Jenkins, for example, these and other sorts of solutions are a solved problem. But we think that continuous delivery remains a problem that needs to be solved. And so our mission is to basically be the enterprise platform solution for the continuous delivery, or CD. In addition to that, your pipeline will contain all kinds of different solutions as part of the environment. So you've got Jira, you've got GitHub Actions, you've got Azure as a deployment target. Where we try to slot Octopus Deploy is right in the middle there, to extend to extend out your pipeline and make it more seamless as part of this process. But of course, this also includes other products as well. As I mentioned before, there are many products available as part of an ecosystem, and we try not to be everything and everything. We just focus on deployments. We do that really, really well. That's where we spend most of our time thinking about this. Not only does that apply to the CI aspect and the target process, but also everything that goes around managing Octopus Deploy. So the provisioning of infrastructure through Terraform, for example, not only can you execute those as part of a deployment process, but you can also utilize Terraform to configure Octopus Deploy itself. We have integration solutions with things like ServiceNow for ITSM, and you'll see this example through the demos that we'll be running through here. So this is where we really think Octopus shines. All right, enough talk. Let's go ahead and get into a demo, and let's see how this thing works. So when you log into Octopus Deploy for the first time, you're going to see an environment that looks like this. This is our dashboard, and this is basically your one-stop shop for everything, understanding what's happening with your deployments. Inside here, you'll see I have a projects as part of a project group, and these projects contain a number of releases. And as your projects grow and as your applications evolve, you'll start to see these releases expand. You'll notice I have these channels here for my environments. So I have development, production, and staging, for example. If I want to, I could configure them any way I wish. And there's lots of different ways in which you can organize these things. You'll notice here I have a separation of concerns through what are called spaces. And spaces are basically an isolation boundary, if you will, that allows you to separate these things away from each other. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to create a new space here called Octopus 101. And inside here, you'll notice I can configure a number of options here. I'm just going to keep the assumed defaults here. I'm going to make myself what's called a space manager. That's not really super important at this point, but you see here I've created a space called Octopus 101. Jumping back to our dashboard, let's now move into that space. You'll notice that it's blank. This is basically the environment that you'll see when you typically fire up Octopus for the first time. We provide you a curated experience here to help you get started. So this is basically an experience, a first-time run experience, if you like. So the first question we're going to ask you, okay, it's like, I want to create a project. So let's just call this Hello Octopus. And you'll notice in here we have an option for specifying that this is a project that is backed by source control. So this is really important to us. A lot of developers care about this. A lot of DevOps engineers care about this. They want to have the ability to manage their projects as a representation in source control. We support that. I'm going to leave that unchecked for now, but if I wanted to, I could actually have this project emit or backed by source control. There's a bunch of other settings here that I can define, but I'm just going to assume the defaults and hit save. The next question we're going to ask you is, okay, you need to specify some environments. Environments are where you deploy to. Now, these names are semantically meaningful to you, but they can be anything you want here. So these are sort of typical names you might see for environments like development, staging, production. You could also include test and QA if you wanted to, but there's lots of different options here, but these are the ones that we provide out of the box. Again, you can create any number of environments you want and name them accordingly. So once I've defined my project and I've defined my environments, the next thing to do is define a deployment process. And this is really at the heart of what Octopus Deploy does. So a deployment process is a series of steps that you will run to deploy software. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a process here, but you'll notice that we create a couple of examples here for you if you wish. You can use those. I'll create a new process, and this will take me into the process editor. The process editor contains a series of steps that I can use to basically piece my deployment process together, sort of like putting Lego blocks together. You'll notice in here we have a number of different types of steps. Again, steps are the building blocks of a deployment process. They're a collection of things that happen to do a deployment. And you'll notice that we have things like script steps, we have steps for AWS, we have steps for Azure, we have steps for Kubernetes, we have steps for Terraform, we have steps for Windows Server, etc. We also have a set of community steps as well. We have over 500 community steps that have been built by the community for a variety of steps. If you want, you can utilize these at your leisure as part of your deployment process. But basically, if you need something to execute as part of your deployment process, this is where you'll find anything that we don't include out of the box. So let's go ahead and start with a very simple run a script step. Incidentally, this is the most popular step that we have in our collection, run a script. So when I click on that, you'll notice that in the well here, you'll see that I have my first step here is listed, step 1, run a script. When I construct my deployment process, those steps will show up here in this section. So as I add more steps, you'll see them listed here. You'll see eventually in a later demo that we can actually control the execution of these steps. We can determine whether or not a step is run successfully or not. We can have them run in parallel. There's a lot of control that we have available to us. So here I'm going to go and specify the name as just run a script step. I have the ability, if I so wish, of executing this inline. So I'll just mimic the example here. So I'll say, hello, Octopus 101. We have a variety of languages that we support out of the box, so you can utilize these. In addition to that, I also have the ability of utilizing variables. Variables are an ambient or an ephemeral sort of aspect to execution. So I can reach up into context and grab these variables if I want to use them. Variables are a really powerful way of templatizing your deployment processes, and I can do lookups quickly and easily utilizing these variables. I can also define my own. So variables are a really powerful way of defining things like secure values, like credentials. If I don't want to have them persisted in the script, I can utilize them as lookups in a secure location. There's lots of things that you can do with them. So we've defined our script here, and we have a bunch of other options we can specify as well. I'm going to utilize the built-in hosted environment here for running this script. When you provision this utilizing Octopus Cloud, we provide a hosted environment for you. Octopus is available not only as a cloud-based solution, but also an on-premise solution. So just to put that out there. There's a bunch of other values that I can specify for the step as well. We can control like how many times we want to execute the script. Like, for example, if I'm connecting to a remote resource and there's network latency, I may want to retry if there's a failure in executing a step. We can define timeouts. There's a bunch of other options we can use for this. I'll go ahead and click Save. And now that I have my deployment process defined, I can go ahead and create what's called a release. Now, a release isn't necessarily what you think of as a release. A lot of developers, when you talk to them, they think, oh, a release is like the actual deployment itself. No, the release is actually a snapshot of all those values you saw in the script step. Things like your variables, the packages that you want to include as part of your deployment. All those aspects of a deployment go into a snapshot version of a deployment. It's called a release. And so when you define a release, you define it here and you give it a version number. Now, there's a bunch of other options you can specify here. You can give it You can utilize semantic versioning if you'd like. You can give it release notes, which can also be auto-generated based on the Git commits. But I'll just go ahead and save this. Once this is saved, all those values are now persisted as part of that snapshot. The reason why this is important is because as you evolve your deployments from, say, testing to staging to production, you don't want those deployments to fail. And the reason why we snapshot is so that they don't fail, because often what happens is between environments, things change. You have different configurations, you have different environment settings, etc. And so by persisting those values or making them available through variables, you can then reliably deploy to those environments. So I have my release here, 001, this awesome release, which uses the script step here. I'm going to go ahead and deploy this to my development environment. So you can specify here a number of environments. I can include or exclude environments. I can specify when I want the environment to be deployed to, either now or later. If I want to, I can exclude any steps as part of this deployment process. I'm going to define what's called a failure mode. Is if a deployment fails, what I want to do, whether or not I want to roll back, for example, I can go ahead and do so, and other options as well. I'll go ahead and click deploy, and you'll see now we'll be taken to this task summary page. So when you execute a deployment in Octopus Deploy, you're executing what's called a server task, and that task has a bunch of things associated with it, things like logs and other things like that. So you can see we're spinning up a dynamic worker here. And we'll go ahead and connect to that once it's available. But eventually what you'll see in this log listing here is the execution of our script step, which outputs that text to the task log. If I had other steps here, you would see them execute here as part of this process. But this is essentially the process by which you can execute a deployment. Again, we're utilizing a release, which is that snapshot version, as I said before, of all the values that we have defined as part of our configuration. And once that's done, we get this nice happy message. We've gone ahead and successfully completed our first deployment. Now, this deployment hasn't done much, right? We've only executed out to the task log this hello message, which, is pretty easy. This is our hello world. But you can imagine that if the step had done things like deployed to IIS or deployed to Kubernetes or deployed to some other environment, you would see the execution of that in line here. But that's essentially the hello world for Octopus as part of this process. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to my slides. So that was the demo that you saw. Now there's lots of parts and pieces to that you need to understand, and we'll jump into this into another demo, but I just wanted to draw these things out as part of the explanation here for what you'll see. So we visually represent your deployment process, including all the conditions and possibly child steps as part of your deployment. We allow you to denote these with markdown-based notes. So if you're sharing these with other team members, they get a sense of why this step is occurring and what implications that step may have. We can also run these steps in parallel if we wish. So that's really useful if you have a variety of targets or things that you need to happen concurrently. So you can define that as part of your deployment process. And we also have a set of labels for denoting environments. There's a bunch of other things as well. We'll get into this in another demo, but this is basically the way in which you will visualize your deployments as part of Octopus. Now, in addition to that, we provide the dashboard, as I showed you earlier, that gives you sort of a one-stop shop for seeing everything in terms of your deployment process and how those things are executing in concert with your environments. So explaining a little bit more of the why, the reason why you may use a tool like Octopus for your deployments, we really harp on the fact that these are very reliable and risk-free deployments with rollback capabilities. This is incredibly important, especially when you consider the fact that deployment can be a pretty gnarly issue to tackle right in terms of your deployment processes. So we define these things as projects, allows you to define things like environments and variables and keep these things packaged in a safe and sane manner. We also include, as part of Octopus, this ability to do release management. So ops teams can utilize Octopus through a feature we have called runbooks. Runbooks allow you to automate basically any routine tasks or emergency operations that you need to execute when doing your deployments or in concert with your deployments. So examples might be, I want to back up my database, or I want to configure my web server a certain way, or I may want to restart my website. These and other types of operations you can do as part of Octopus. If you're shipping to a container-based solution such as Kubernetes, we support that as well. You can utilize containers very, very easily as part of Octopus, and we support a variety of integration points, whether it's through YAML or Helm or Customize. These and other sorts of scenarios are well supported by Octopus. And the real reason why you might use a tool like Octopus is because it gives you not only that consistency and compliance, but also the speed of doing deployments. You have confidence in deploying to your environments because you've articulated them well inside of Octopus. Another feature that we have as part of this is support for what is called tenants or multi-tenancy. So an example of this might be, let's say I'm running a hotel chain, or I have a set of clinics for a veterinarian service. These and other sorts of scenarios are really, really useful for Octopus Deploy because we articulate these as tenants. And this allows you to control where and when your deployments go out to through these sort of tenants. So multi-tenancy or multi-tenancy support is a first-class construct inside of Octopus Deploy. In addition to the speed and reliance of that, you also get full compliance across the entire product. So we audit everything. We also allow you to integrate with ITSM solutions. So if you're interested in integration with Jira Service Management or ServiceNow, let's say you want to have an approval process for your deployments through governance, etc., we integrate with this and allows you to see basically who's approved these things, and it's fully auditable, which is great. All right, let's jump into another demo here. And for this example, I'd like to show you some other examples here of scenarios where you define a deployment process. So here's a more elaborate sort of deployment process. This is utilizing a bunch of tools and integration points that we have. So for example, we have integrations with Redgate. They're friends of ours, and they do a lot of great work around the database space. And so database deployments can be really, really gnarly. And so there's some great tools from Redgate, and we support those as integrated points with our deployment processes. So you can certainly do that. A very common scenario you'll see inside of a deployment process is notifying individuals via Slack or Teams. So a common scenario might be, hey, I'm doing a deployment. Let me go ahead and notify, for example, in this case, the database administrators that there are changes that are pending to the database through a deployment process. So you can execute that as part of a parallel run. So you can see here, I have a little symbol here denoting that these two steps here are running in parallel as part of this. So I'm notifying my database administrators in Slack, and then I'm doing a what's called a review migration. So a review migration is basically a step where you're doing a check on a migration script and getting a sign off whether that has been approved or not. We have steps that are also not just automated, but integrated with the human process. So we have what's called manual interventions, which basically means I have to wait for a human to show up and approve or deny a deployment from continuing. So we take into account the fact that people want to validate whether or not something is going to successfully run. And in this example, if I'm deploying to a database, I may want to manually review the migration script that it was generated for the database before allowing it to continue. So these and other types of operations you can certainly do. So just to remind you, if you have any questions of what I'm showing here, feel free to take advantage of the Q&A pane. Happy to answer any questions you have during this webinar. So this is an example of how you may integrate with that. A question might come also, what does it look like from the integration perspective? Like, let's say I'm kicking things off through a CI process. What does that look like? Well, if we navigate over here, this is a YAML file describing a set of GitHub actions that are running. So I have a set of workflows that are running here in GitHub, and you'll notice that down here at the bottom, we have a set of GitHub actions that have been defined specifically for Octopus Deploy. So Octopus Deploy has over 10 actions defined as part of GitHub Marketplace. And you can use these for doing deployments in conjunction with GitHub Actions. So if you're utilizing GitHub Actions, you can certainly use this as part of your deployment process to kick things off. So in this example here, I'm doing things like pushing packages to Octopus. So package is typically a binary, like a zip archive or an exe or something of that nature, like a library file. I'm then taking the build information and pushing that to Octopus as well. So build information are all the commits that have been done against a repo, for example, and I want to compile those and then generate release notes from those. We call that build information, and you can push that to Octopus Deploy. We can create releases, which is the same step I showed you earlier in the demo, and I can also deploy releases as part of this process. So these and other sorts of steps you could do as part of a GitHub Actions run, and you'll find these available in the marketplace. If you search for Octopus, you'll see them listed there. These and other sorts of actions are available there for you to use. And we have, as I said, many actions that you can use as part of your GitHub Actions pipeline. So we have a question here. What about deployments in AWS containers? So we do support the ability of doing deployments of your images that you propagate. There's a bunch of new features we recently added for images themselves. So if you're pushing to AWS, that is something that we support. So if we take a look at here, our deployment process, let me jump over here and go back to my deployment process. I'll go ahead and add a step here. If we take a look at AWS, you can see we have a bunch of options here. So I can execute a CLI-based process for Amazon. So AWS CLI-based Amazon execution. We have a number of other options here for things like CloudFormation, and I can push packages here. We have a bunch of other steps as well as part of our community steps for AWS as well. So a bunch of other steps have been propagated here in the community. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do as part of this. But certainly when it comes to Kubernetes or containers that you're pushing to a variety of cloud providers, whether it's Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS, we certainly support those as part of that process. You'll have to take a look at what your scenarios are in terms of your support and what you would like to do. But these and other scenarios we certainly support as part of that process. So thanks for the question there. So jumping back to my example that I showed you earlier, sorry, I'm jumping around here. So we can define the deployment process here. We can have these executed and integrated with a backend process like GitHub Actions, and you'll find these available up on our GitHub Marketplace. This also applies to other CI environments as well. So here's an example of Azure DevOps, which is a very popular sort of scenario for a lot of folks. We have built-in support in Azure pipelines, so you can execute the similar types of processes within Azure pipelines, and you'll notice that we have the ability to do similar types of steps. These aren't all of them, but they are similar. So the ability to push packages, create releases, deploy releases, promote projects, etc. These and other types of operations we support as part of Octopus integration with things like Azure DevOps. We also have integration with TeamCity. We have integrations through a lot of different means as well. If there's an integration that we don't support out of the box, that's okay. We have a CLI that you can use. So a lot of automation is typically done by folks who are rolling their own deployment scripts in concert with Octopus Deploy. So they're kickstarting something, utilizing Octopus as part of their deployment. You can utilize our CLI, which allows you to communicate very effectively with Octopus itself. And so this is available up on GitHub if you're at all interested. But that's certainly something that you could do as part of this deployment process. Awesome. So as you can see, Octopus Deploy is there to basically allow you to define these deployment scripts pretty easily and execute them. We talked about a bunch of other stuff as well in our slides, namely operations. So I can execute a bunch of runbooks if I wanted to. These are typically operations that you may define as part of a maintenance step. The way you define runbooks is very similar to the way you define deployment processes. There are a series of steps that execute in concert with your deployments. I can define a process here, and I can have them executed as part of maintenance tasks if I wanted. It's a similar sort of environment, but they're really, really effective way of your ops team working in concert with your DevOps teams to make things happen. We haven't even got into project variables or variables themselves or tenants. There's lots of other stuff that you need to know, but that's okay. As you start getting familiar with Octopus Deploy, you'll start to see these things come to life through the tool itself. And we have documentation across the board describing all of this. So that's a very, very high level, very quick sort of what is Octopus Deploy in this webinar. You've learned a little bit about how it works and why you should use it. We've talked a little bit about some of the fundamental tenets of Octopus, namely things like projects, deployment processes, and releases. I've shown you how to create a deployment process from scratch and how to execute it as part of creating a release and then deploying it to an environment, and then how to trigger those through a CI process such as GitHub Actions. As I mentioned before, there's a ton of actions or steps rather, that you can execute as part of a deployment process. As I said, we have over 500 steps that you can use through the community library. If we're not including it as part of our support within Octopus, you'll certainly find it in our community library. There's lots of stuff there. You can download a trial of Octopus today. You can go to our website, sign up for a free trial. That's not only a trial of Octopus Server, which is the on-prem solution, but also Octopus Cloud, which is our SaaS-based solution for that. If you want, you can also download additional aspects or tools to Octopus, namely our CLI, or get links to our GitHub Actions if you'd like. And we recently just shipped the latest version of Octopus, 2024.1 is now available. And we have lots and lots of stuff that we've added there, namely things like support for OIDC. We have support for, we're building stuff as well for things like a GitHub app. And you'll find these listed inside of our roadmap. So if you go to roadmap.octopus.com, there you'll find a list of things that we are not only working on, but have released. And you can see there's lots of stuff that we're releasing to both Octopus Cloud and Octopus Server. If you have any questions, feel free to be part of our community. We have a Slack channel that you can join. We have over 6,000 folks on the channel answering questions, asking questions, getting feedback on deployment processes, etc. And then we also have our docs as well that you can reference if you so wish. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. These are some links for you to check out, including our YouTube channel, which we post almost weekly now, video, some content there. And in the meantime, what I'd like to do is open up for any questions that may be left as part of this webinar. So I'll give it a second here in case there are any questions. It's nice to see folks from around the world, which is great. It's been a while since I've been back to Canada, but hello to my fellow Canadians. Here's a question that's come in. So can Octopus provision environments, let's say in AWS, like CDK or Terraform? You can execute Terraform steps, for example, as part of a deployment process. So as an example, you can provision environments. So let me jump back into the demo here, and I'll just show you how that works. So inside here, I'll say add a step. And if I wanted to, I could execute, say, a Terraform plan. So if I wanted to, I could execute a plan here to provision resources. There are steps that allow you to do more intricate things like executing against providers. So, you know, it depends on how you're wanting to target this, the status of provisioning, but it is something that you can do. And if there's a step there that's missing, I'm sure our community has addressed it. There's lots and lots of steps available for you to use. And if you just drill down into the various categories, there's lots of things there. So an example of Azure, bicep templates, for example, for executing those as part of a provisioning process. There's lots of ways in which you can do this, but yes, certainly something that you can do. You can execute this as part of a deployment process, or you can execute it as part of a runbook for ops if you wish. So great question there. All right, this is the awkward silent moment where I'm waiting for other questions to come in. If you don't have any other questions, that's fine. Feel free to reach out. Let me know on email if you have any questions. Happy to answer them there. Just to remind you, I'll just go ahead and bring up my contact details again here. Let's see, switching over. All right, there you go. So you can reach me at john.bristowe@octopus.com. We have as I said before, we have a very extensive community that you can join. So our Slack channel's got folks asking and answering questions all the time. So feel free to participate there if you have anything that you'd like to talk about. All right, I think we're at the end of our time. Thank you very much for joining us. We do these monthly, so feel free to join us next month. And before I forget, one thing I'd just like to show is that this is not the end of the webinar session scheduled by any means. We have lots of webinars coming up. If you go to this website here, octopus.com/webinars, you'll see a bunch of things that are coming. So we have webinars featuring, myself, others at Octopus Deploy talking about a bunch of things. We're talking about IDPs or independent software, internal development platform. We're talking about Kubernetes deployments. We have a session featuring our new feature for Kubernetes agent. We talk about Kubernetes CD at scale. We've got lessons learned. We've got all kinds of sessions that are coming up. So that again, that's octopus.com/webinars. And if you want, you can check us out at a variety of events that we'll be at coming up. So if you happen to be around at a conference coming up, we would love to see you there. Anyways, that was just something I just wanted to chuck in there. Anyways, thanks again for joining. I really appreciate it. Nice to meet you all. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.